Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. Wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Wild Health Podcast. Today, you've got Dr. Jeff Graham hosting, and we are so pleased to have Matt Zemon. I didn't even ask you, is that correct, Matt?
It's Zemon, but I'll go with whatever you want to go with today, Jeff.
Okay, Matt Zemon joining us. And I'm really excited to talk today with Matt about something he is deeply involved in and passionate about, and something that a lot of us at Wild Health really believe in the science behind, and that's the use of psychedelics and their healing properties and potential. So hope to learn a lot today in the podcast, and I'm really happy to have you here, Matt.
Jeff, I'm glad to be here, and I appreciate the way you are looking at healthcare as a whole. It's refreshing to have this more holistic, out of the traditional system of approach.
Oh man, well I appreciate it. We like to think that we do that well. So, really quickly, just to embarrass you here a little bit, I'm going to brag on you before we get rolling. So Matt is the author of the best-selling books, Psychedelics for Everyone, A Beginner's Guide to These Powerful Medicines for Anxiety, Depression, Addiction, PTSD, and Expanding Consciousness. He's also authored Beyond the Trip, and then I think most recently released, right, Veteran's Guide to Psychedelics?
Yeah, that just came out in October.
Okay, fantastic. We hope to really dig into that today. He holds a master's degree in psychology and neuroscience from King's College London and specializes in the mental health impacts of psychedelics. His work explores their potential to catalyze profound personal transformations, and in particular, the Veteran's Guide to Psychedelics has been developed in collaboration with the Heroic Hearts Project. I hope we can hear more about that. That sounds really like a wonderful collaboration. And it's combining ancient healing traditions with modern practices to offer veterans a holistic approach to healing. And all proceeds, you were just telling me, Matt, go to supporting the Heroic Hearts Project. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right on. It was an amazing journey for the past year putting the book together, and while the book is for veterans, it's for anybody who's thinking about psychedelics, and whether they're thinking about it in a medical context or in a ceremonial or in a retreat, it works for all of the above.
Oh, it's fantastic. And I find that is true to a lot of these books that I pick up, because I'm interested in a topic, and I think, is this going to apply to me anyway? And it turns out we're all human, right? So I think usually there's a lot of crossover. Well, let's just start right there then. What really inspired you to write the Veteran's Guide to Psychedelic Journeys and this collaboration with the Heroic Hearts Project? Where was this born out of?
Yeah, Jesse Gould, who's a former Army Ranger, reached out to me. He was setting up a program in Oregon for veterans, and one of the vets had one of my workbooks. And he said, "Can you make one of these for veterans and give some more content to it?" And over the course of a year, put this together. It was just fascinating. It was fascinating to hear the stories, to understand kind of the veteran journey from, in many cases, childhood trauma into the military, back into civilian life. And then to see what groups like Heroic Hearts Project are doing to help them when the typical antidepressants fail. We have somewhere between 18 and 44 veterans a day taking their lives, and that's what science is trying to solve for. So it's not saying that antidepressants are bad, it's just that they don't work on everybody. So how do we come up with something for people who are not responding to the typical pharmacological or talk therapies? And that's what I think plant medicine can be for veterans.
I love it. I love it, man. Well, tell me, let's back up a little bit then, because you've had this successful career. You've fallen into something that you're obviously very passionate about. Tell us a little bit about that journey. Like what led you as a person to become
Mm.
interested in psychedelics?
Jeff, candidly, I fell into this by accident. I was just a business owner, and some friends invited me to a guided magic mushroom or psilocybin journey.
Mhm.
And at first, I said no. I didn't do drugs. Just wasn't in my wheelhouse. And eventually, something inside of me said yes. And that first experience was so transformational. Um, I reconnected with my mom who died when I was 22. She was 49.
Mhm.
I could see the connection between her and me and my kids. I could feel this
Mm.
unconditional safety and love, and then realized, wait a minute, I don't feel that way in my everyday life. What's going on? And I knew that I needed to learn more about these tools, and I knew I needed them to be a part of my life. And that's led this journey to the school that you talked about. Now I'm in a doctorate of ministry program, and I just love this work and love what it's done for me and my family.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So for someone new to the topic, as we
Hmm.
talked about, we have patients at Wild Health who definitely have used this modality or are curious about it. For someone new to the topic, how would you explain these benefits, maybe on a more scientific level? Kind of what they're doing with brain chemistry, and then are there any risks also associated?
Yeah, let's definitely talk about both those things. So start with kind of how do they work? And there's a not all psychedelics are the same. There's a difference
Hmm.
between, let's say, legal ketamine and ayahuasca. But as a whole, what's going to happen is it's going to first turn off kind of shame, blame, and guilt, or turn that down. So it's going to enable us to reprocess stories from the past. It's going to, as we get older, we are pruning our neural pathways.
Mm.
And the psychedelics, in many cases, are going to create new neural sorry, not new. It's going to reactivate neural pathways that haven't fired in a long, long time. Um, and that those reconnections of brain synapses is what allows us to have these awakenings, these insights, these awarenesses with these medicines, and to realize that, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to think about this the way I've been thinking about it, or I don't have to think about myself the way I've been thinking about myself. And that's incredibly freeing. For many people on a psychedelic, they'll have some type of mystical experience where they feel like they've connected to something bigger than themselves. They realize that they're not separate and apart from nature, that they are nature.
Mhm.
And we put all of those things together, and many people rate this as one of the top 5 experiences of their life. And we've seen that in studies that say shortly thereafter, how do you rate this? And follow-up studies years later, how would you rate this experience? Um, I think this breaking of repetitive thinking patterns, if we can just think
Mm.
about psychedelics for that,
Mhm.
is why we're seeing hundreds of academic institutions studying them for depression, anxiety, OCD, eating disorder, substance use challenges, behavioral challenges, anything that's involves repetitive thinking. Um, that's why we're looking at these.
Mm. Mm. So is that the default mode network you're kinda referencing there?
It used to be simplified, and yes, that
Yeah.
it was quieting down the default mode network, that inner voice, the inner narrator. There's been some nuance around that, but yes, I think that's an easy way to understand for the listeners that when we quiet down that piece of the brain that's talking all the time. For
Yeah.
many of us, it feels like the weight of the world is lifted off of our shoulders, and and we can just be aware of ourselves in a way that's different than everyday existence.
I love it. I love it. Tell us a little bit about the history, like thinking about, historically, how have these been used in different societies?
Yeah, and this is a piece that I think I didn't understand. I always thought about psychedelics only really from kind of the indigenous perspective. Like I was like, oh, I know Native Americans use peyote, and I know down there in Mexico they use some kind of psychedelic and had human sacrifice, and
Yeah.
South America, they were using this ayahuasca thing. What
Yeah.
I didn't realize is for thousands of years, the Greeks used had a psychedelic ceremony that was like an initiation that people like Plato and Socrates and Marcus Aurelius all
Really?
participated in. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then
Okay.
we
I didn't
had,
know that.
I mean, obviously throughout Europe, witches were burned for their uses of plant medicine. We had soma was used in India, which I mean, hundreds of verses written about how powerful of a psychedelic soma was. All throughout Scandinavia, we had shaman. Africa, there are cave paintings 7 to 9,000 years old of African mushroom shaman. So
Mm,
my point of bringing this up is that we all have some type of psychedelic lineage. It's just been suppressed by church and by state.
mm,
And as modern tribes people, we have the opportunity to then decide, okay, I want to take this back. And how then becomes the question. And we can meet psychedelics in a medical model with legalized ketamine or clinical trials. We can meet it in a ceremonial model with many of these underground psychedelic churches, or by flying to Mexico or Costa Rica or Brazil or Colombia. And then there is a ton of retreats out there in Jamaica and the Netherlands that are also offering kind of a hybrid approach.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, I like that. Tell me though, because I have explored a lot of this field myself and thinking about these retreats, when you're vetting these things like retreats or opportunities to maybe experience this, are there certain things you look for in an experience that tell you it's going to be good? It's going to be a good place to be.
Yeah, what I love about this question you're asking, Jeff, about how do we pick the right psychedelic experience or how do we pick any
Yeah.
psychedelic experience?
Yeah.
It's the exact same questions that you would ask a medical provider as you would a ceremonial provider, as you would a retreat provider.
Okay.
And I can break these down in kind of three categories: source, set, and setting. So source is, where did the drugs come from? So if you're working with a medical provider, they came from a pharmacy. So we can check that off the list.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're working with a ceremonial provider or an underground provider or a retreat provider, great. Ask them, where did you get your medicine? How do you know it's safe? Do you test it? Do you try it? What do you do? And how often do you use this medicine? So that, am I going to be the first one who's ever tried this? Did you just buy this off of Instagram? Or am I going to be the 1,000th person or somewhere in between? Set is the mindset. Whoever you're working with, asking them, what do you do for me in advance? Do you help me set my intentions? Do you do an informed consent? Do you do a medical screening to make sure I don't have any contraindications that would make using a psychedelic dangerous? That I don't have a family history or use a prescription or a supplement that might make this dangerous? Have you talked me through what's going to happen, what's not going to happen? What are the rules of engagement? So asking those questions about how are you going to help me with my mindset? And then also, how are you going to help me with my mindset after the ceremony? Or are you not? Are you going to do any type of integration? Do you help me unpack this? Or do I need to go find that on my own? So that's set. And then setting is, what's the physical environment? Am I coming into a medical setting that's going to look like a doctor's office? Great. Now I
Yeah.
know. Am I coming into something that looks more like a living room? Is it going to be a ceremonial setting? Who's going to be with me in the room? Do I have a mask? Do I have music? Do I have a blanket? Tell me more about the setting. And then listening to all of those things, you can then decide what feels right for you. And what feels right for me might not be what feels right for you. But those are the questions to ask. Again, whether it's a doctor, a shaman, or a retreat salesperson, these are the questions that we want to know the answers to.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great response. That was a perfect lead in for set and setting. So I think obviously you referenced there the importance of pre and post integration, preparation and then post integration. Talk a little bit about that and where you see the value in that with the people, maybe thinking of the veterans that you're familiar with. Tell us about that, how that works.
Yeah, so the word that is often used in the psychedelic space, as you know, is integration.
Mm-hmm.
And what research is showing is for many people is about, how do I optimize this experience? How do I make sure I take these insights and awakenings and awarenesses, these moments in time of catalytic understanding, and turn those into real, meaningful, lasting change? And that's what integration is about. Following the consumption of a psychedelic, we have about a 30-day window of extra neuroplasticity. So our brain, we have a little biochemical boost to help us change our behaviors. So a lot of times we say, okay, if you're going to do a psychedelic for 30 days afterwards, have a gratitude practice, help train our mind for
Mm.
the positive, have some type of habit tracker tool where you're going to, okay, this is where I'm trying to get to. I've decided this is important, and now I'm going to start training myself to actually achieve this objective, whatever that is. Um, it's a great time for journaling, and it's a great time for community, for talking about what's happened with people who understand and people who are supportive of this process. That can be a therapist, it can be a coach, it can be a medical professional, it can be a spiritual community. But just having someone else to share these experiences with is, I think, is a important part of the process for those that want to optimize. Which, and again, I think people, well, some people might approach this medically saying, I am experiencing depression or anxiety and I want to optimize by experiencing less of those things. Great. And others might say, I feel pretty good, but I'm 50 and my kids are about to go to school, and what's next? And I'm
Mm.
trying to understand this and to get
Mhm.
alignment between what I do and how I earn money and how I live my life. Having some place to unpack those things can be so valuable following the awarenesses that are brought on, occasioned through the psychedelic.
Yeah, yeah. Quick follow-up question to that,
Sure.
because I've experienced this personally. A trusted therapist who's maybe not trained in post-integration techniques versus someone who has actually gone through, let's use ketamine as an example, because there's this ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, criteria that counselors can go through, and mental health workers. Is that important in your eyes, whether they've had that training or not?
Ah, Jeff, this is such a tricky question. And here's why
Yeah.
this is tricky. Because psychedelics have been illegal for so long,
Mhm.
there are people who have spent a lot of time practicing with psychedelics that don't have any type of licensure or certification.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
there are also people who are trained at types of therapy that are more about questions and having the person find their own inner voice.
Mm.
And there's other people who are trained at, I'm going to help share my knowledge with you. My personal philosophy, and this is not everybody's, my personal, I'm going to be really clear, philosophy when it comes to psychedelics is this is about people discovering their inner wisdom and finding their inner voice. So it's much more important to sit with somebody non-judgmentally with love, ask good questions, and let them find their own answers and embody their own answers and have that come forward than it is to work with somebody who might have something to teach you or
Mm.
teach me. Again, that's my experience with these particular tools, that we all have really powerful knowledge inside, and these tools help us remember that knowledge and
Mm.
move forward with it.
Mm.
That being said, I'm talking about more of the optimizing crowd, people who are between a 2 and an 8 on depression. Like, yeah, they have some, 2 and a 7. They have some, they have normal kind of run-of-the-mill life, existential feelings, relationships, kids, jobs, that kind of stuff. If someone is actively suicidal, if someone is having a major depressive episode, um, so that's when seeing a much more trained professional is
Mm.
probably a safer bet than just doing a community or a coaching type of setting. Does that make sense, Jeff?
I think so. I think what I'm hearing you say is, if you're just that person who's in this phase of life where there's a lot of life transition going on, and you're looking for some sage inner wisdom to maybe percolate to the top, it may not be as important as if you're really in a place of despair around a certain diagnosis or personality trait that's bringing you down. You think it's more important for that crew maybe to have someone who's very well experienced. Is that right?
Yeah, and I guess I feel it's also a little bit of both. So, for example, um, people have recently lost a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perfect time. It's a beautiful time to go to psychedelic medicine
Mm.
and it's also a perfect time to work with a therapist in addition to as scaffolding. So it's like, it's so funny. We in our culture, we want to say this is science and this is ceremony.
Yeah.
And to me, we can have this as a collaboration. Come to ceremony and experience this connection with source and feel your inner voice come through and embody the knowledge that we are all connected and that you are loved at some level. And then turn to the medical professionals afterwards and have some therapy. And that's beautiful and that's okay. And they don't have to be black and white. In the ceremony, people don't have to make medical claims. Nor does the therapist have to say, I'm endorsing 100% you going and doing some psychedelic.
Okay.
It can be a collaboration.
Yeah. So they're not mutually exclusive.
Not at
Sounds
all.
like, yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
And I say
100%.
therapist, it can be a coach. It can be a great listener. It can be a great friend. Whoever's listening, using your discernment, figure out who is going to be your support person as you choose which medicine you're going to do and as part of this process.
Yeah, I love that. So I think that's the take-home message, right? This integration, this support that you need around times of this can be just exponentially beneficial, make the experience that much more powerful.
And and also because it's such a these non-ordinary states of consciousness are so non-ordinary. So how do we make sense of what we saw? How do we make sense of how we felt? And having someone who's grounded, who can say, tell me more about that, Jeff. Tell me more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That helps a lot when things switch and there's different ways to view things. Also hold you accountable. Like one of the rules of psychedelic work and in the space that I work in is like no major life decisions for at least 2 weeks. Having someone grounded who can say like, no,
Yeah.
whoa. You promised you weren't going to make a life decision. Hold that promise for another week. If it's still important, come back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to leave that job or that person right now. Let's
buy that house or leave that house or any of those things.
Yeah.
We don't even take,
Okay.
I mean, in many of the communities that I work with won't even take a donation for 2 weeks, which I think is actually, it's another good practice. Are there any upsells at the end of my ceremony or my medical treatment? There shouldn't be, because nobody's in a place to make an informed decision about an upsell for a few weeks after whatever it is that they've been offered.
That's a really good point. Okay. Yeah. So maybe another kind of vetting criteria when you're looking at places. Yeah. Well, let's talk. You've referenced a couple of times some of the legality and maybe some of the ethical considerations. Tell us about that landscape a little bit right now. How is that changing with the legal aspect of using these medicines?
I mean, what an incredible time to be alive. So we have in America these ways that people access psychedelics. We have a legal medical framework with ketamine. So you can go into a ketamine provider in all 50 states and you can access that tool. And is it technically a psychedelic? No, it's a dissociative anesthetic, but it acts in a similar way. So it's a good starting point for many people. The caution here, which goes back to our previous discussion, is there are ketamine providers who believe this is a biochemical reaction. It's just going to work in your glutamate system and that's it. And you're going to come in, they're going to give you an IV or a shot, and you're going to have your experience and they're going to send you on your way. And there's other ketamine providers, and that's legal. And there are other ketamine providers who believe it's a biochemical, psychosocial, spiritual process. And they're going to treat it more like that ceremony I was talking about. So we as consumers have to be aware and ask the questions. There's even at-home ketamine where you can do lozenges and I guess now intramuscular shots, which is wild. I didn't know they were going to do that. And it's not that those are wrong. It's you have to provide more for yourself in those experiences. So just being aware of what you get and what you don't get. Meanwhile, we have hundreds of psychedelic churches in America. I think you're up in the Asheville area. I'm in Chapel Hill, but all across the country. And these churches, there's 4 churches that actually have a true federal exemption. The rest are saying we are protected by the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and our Constitution, and they're acting kind of in a defensive mode. But that's another way that many people are meeting the psychedelics.
Mm.
We have a whole world of underground coaches that are using these tools because they know they've been effective because they've been used for thousands of years. Um, and then we have these retreats that are popping up all over the world. I think what I'd love to just touch on for a moment here is about risk reduction,
Yes.
um,
Yeah, please.
as it relates to all of this. And
Mhm.
I never ever use the word safe. And I want this to really come through to your listeners that every drug has risk. Acetaminophen, the active ingredient in over-the-counter painkiller, kills over 400 people a year in America. So every drug has risk, and psilocybin and LSD and MDMA and ayahuasca are no different. There are risks.
Mhm.
And we can look at studies, and there's a study by Dr. David Nutt from Imperial College where he says, well, the most harm to self and harm to others is alcohol. It's a 72, and psilocybin is the least, and it's a 6. And he is right on, and I love that study. And a lot of harm can happen in that 6.
Hmm.
So it's up to us to pay attention to source, where those drugs come from. So we're protecting ourselves from laced and contaminated drugs. Set our mindset. Are we there because we want to be there? Or do we know what we're getting into? Do we know how long it's going to last? We have people who can help us. And then our setting. When we're in this non-ordinary state, harm can happen when people do
Mhm.
things to us that we don't want to have happen. Harm
Yeah.
can happen if someone's not paying attention and I go wander off into a street or jump off of a balcony. So paying attention again to source, set, and setting are the primary ways that we all, whether it's again medical, ceremonial, or retreat, that we reduce the risk. So as long as we are taking the psychedelic with intention and paying attention to source, set, and setting, we can really lower those risks for me, what I consider to be a very manageable
Yeah.
amount of risk. But everybody needs to make that decision for themselves and in terms of what they're willing to risk to use these tools.
Yeah. So well said. Yeah. We talk about risk versus benefit with every patient we have when we start a prescription medicine on them. And so it sounds like you're saying this same consideration needs to be made every time you make this decision.
It is, and actually, and Jeff, I don't want you to just gloss over that. What you do at Wild Health, by having more time with your patients and by being able to talk about what is the root issue and then
Mhm.
explain you can do this or you can do that, and these are the things that could happen, it's not what I experience in my health system down the road here. That's for many people is a luxury. I think we wouldn't have. Let's talk about antidepressants for a moment.
Sure.
Those were never meant to be lifelong prescriptions. They were meant to be episodic. But our
Mhm.
health system, we get people on. We don't have the budgets to get them off. We don't have the pace,
Mm.
the time to wean somebody off of these antidepressants once they're on it. And now all of a sudden, we have people on antidepressants for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30
Oh, more
years.
than that. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was never meant to be that way. So I love
Yeah.
that you give people that. But I think if I think if many people knew that with certain SSRIs, there's going to be 71% sexual dysfunction. Like
Mhm.
we just the weight gain, the lethargy, the suicidal ideation, the different things that are possible. It's a lot of risk with
Mhm.
those, and if they work for you, amazing, they work for you. But I
Sure.
think we as consumers should be able to weigh what are the risks of an SSRI antidepressant and what are the risks of ketamine. Why do I
Mhm.
have to start with the SSRI versus ketamine? And then what's the risk of ketamine versus psilocybin? Why do I need to
Mhm.
start with ketamine
Mhm.
versus psilocybin? Um, and I know that's not apples to apples, but I think you know where I'm going
No,
with that.
but I do 100%. But I also feel like, unfortunately, the answer to that question is often driven by big pharma,
Of
right?
course.
Because they're not going to pay for some of these therapies that we know work, and maybe we can dive into that literature. I think more and more people are becoming familiar with that these have higher efficacy rates than our traditional antidepressants, our SSRIs, our SNRIs. Yeah, so maybe talk a little bit about that. I know that if anybody's read How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan,
Hmm.
he talks about this. It's been covered in a lot of different publications over the last couple of years, we had these amazing response rates when these drugs were first studied, and we're still seeing that in follow-up studies now that they're becoming more used. But tell us about the differences there. What in some of the conditions that you work with, PTSD, anxiety, depression, and response rates?
So we see, I'm trying to think where I want to start here. There's such a meaty question you just asked.
Yeah,
So let
totally.
me start with veterans first, because we were on that earlier.
Yeah.
So we talked about 18 to 44 veterans a day killing themselves. We talked about the primary reason why is the antidepressants so often prescribed aren't working on enough of them.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're talking about phase 3 clinical trials using a tool called MDMA given to people with treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder. And you have the Pearl Institute up near you, which has done beautiful work with this, and the Midhofers up near you who have done beautiful work with this.
So this is great. One of my best friends is married to Michael and Annie's daughter, so I see about every social occasion I go to. So it's great to catch up with Michael about what's going on. Though it's not been great news lately, obviously.
It isn't, but let's make sure your listeners hear this number. So 3 sessions of MDMA with therapy before and therapy after. And these humans who have treatment-resistant PTSD, which means nothing has worked. No pharmacological, no tox solutions worked. 3 sessions with MDMA therapy before and after, and over 71% no longer qualified as having PTSD. 71%. That is a number of efficacy, of response that is just incredible. Now, unfortunately, the FDA said, we don't have enough information yet because the drug company did something very strange. They said, it's not just the drug, it's the drug and the therapy working together. And that doesn't happen in drug development.
Never.
So now the FDA is saying, well, we want more studies. And now the drug company is saying, well, what if we just remove the therapy? It was just the drug and people did therapy. So there's who knows, but it's a sign of what's possible. And this is a very specific psychedelic called MDMA in a very specific manner on a very specific population. But those kinds of results are incredibly promising. We've seen similar things. Ketamine for depression, work on the glutamate system versus serotonin. Okay, that's super interesting. Psilocybin, end-of-life cancer patients would be a study at Johns Hopkins. 1 dose and upwards of 80% had reductions in depression, anxiety, and hopelessness. And then 4.5 years later, those still alive, 70-some% of them said, I can still feel the effects. These are incredible numbers. And this is why we have, hundreds of academic institutions studying this. It's incredible. There's even a cool study now, speaking of end of life, where they're working as a dyad. They're using MDMA not just on the person with cancer, not just the person dying, but on one loved one. And in the ceremonial space, we see this all the time where people come in and say, I want to say goodbye to my family or my friends. Let's do a ceremony together. So that's kind of normal in ceremony. It's not normal yet in medical, but this is the fact that there is a phase 2 trial happening. This is at Sunstone up in Maryland. This is promising for what's coming up in the future for all of us, that we can have access to these tools and that we can have this time to love and to have conversation and to have those moments together while we still can. It's really, again, exciting.
Yeah. I love that. So this is a little bit off the cuff, not any sort of scripted question, but you just brought this up. I'm curious, outside of that study with MDMA, are there other studies that have looked at relationship and actually working with a person who may be affected and the partner present, both undergoing the experience?
I don't know that answer, Jeff. My understanding is this was the first dyad study that was approved, and I believe it's actually I think USANA is the one sponsoring it, and it's being run at Sunstone. I don't know of any other dyad studies. And again, I could be wrong, but I don't know of any others. And it is interesting. We step out of this, we move. So again, so much of what we do in medical help is like, it's about me, I, great. I get it. And as soon as we take a psychedelic, we switch so quickly from me to we. I see how we're connected. I see how we're related. I see how the earth is supporting me. I see how the plants and birds and bugs are helping me breathe and live. I see that I'm part of this whole thing. That's amazing. And when we do that in an end of life scenario, and like, okay, was my relationship with my parents, my friend, my whomever, what I wanted it to be? No. Were they doing the best that they knew how to do with the awareness that they had at that moment in time? Yeah, they were.
Yes. Yeah.
And what do
And
I want from my living and healing and growing moving forward? And what can I share with them if I choose to now while we're still alive?
yeah. Yeah. That's the ultimate forgiveness question, right? Or relationship question, where if you can truly get to that place where you're believing that person was doing the best they could with what they had available, that's for me personally, I can say that's been a big relationship healer for sure. And I agree with you. I think psychedelics have a lot of potential in that arena for sure.
Let's
Tell
stick
me
with
real
one more
quick.
thing before you move
Oh
to another
yeah, no,
question, though.
please
This is
go
because you
ahead.
brought up
Yeah.
cost. I want your listeners to hear this.
Yes,
So when it comes to
please.
ketamine, again, this is we have access to most insurance companies won't pay for it. So if you're going to an in-house ketamine experience, I don't know, $500 to $1,000
It's
a
been my
dose
experience.
in
Yeah,
that
5.
zone,
Yeah.
and they're probably going to make you do like the protocols all talk about 6. Now, not everybody does it this way, by the way, but that's what the protocols they want you to do kind of 6 treatments within like a month. And then after that, they spread it out. So yeah, $6,000. If you're doing an at home, like one of the at home providers, maybe it's $1,200 for 6 doses, but you've got to provide a lot of the stuff on your own. But it's way more accessible. That's kind of the entry point. When we talk about ceremonial psychedelics, you're looking at I don't know. There's some ayahuasca circles that are $300-400. There are psilocybin circles that are I don't know $750 to $1,500, depending on whether you're doing it legally in Oregon or doing it here. And then these retreats between $3,000 and $10,000 for a week or for 5 days is kind of what I'm
Yeah.
seeing. So we talk about that's expensive. It's all expensive. It's
Yeah.
all expensive, and it's less than divorce, and it's we get one life. We get to have this human experience,
Yeah.
and to not have a life where we feel in awe and wow and lucky and grateful. Um, I don't know what's worth what else is worth more than those things. So yeah, it's expensive, but many people they have a single or a few of these experiences, and then they have a different perspective for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
unusual.
Big upfront investment that can go a long way for sure. For
For
sure.
sure.
What I wanted to do is shift gears a little bit and talk about the popularity or the kind of the explosion in these things. I think it started back with Silicon Valley and a lot of these people that were, that was where microdosing took off to have all these amazing ideas that you wouldn't have otherwise. Tell me, like in the corporate influential world, are we still seeing some of that? Do you see a role for this and technology and innovation at all?
Yeah. So all of the above. So we're seeing. Let's start with Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss will say,
Okay.
I don't know a billionaire that doesn't do psychedelics. Not one. I don't know a billionaire that doesn't do psychedelics. Okay, that's interesting for those who are in that kind of entrepreneurial spin. In Silicon Valley back in the 60s, there was a study where they took I think they're engineers who had some problem they couldn't solve for a
Yep.
few months.
Yep.
And they gave
I
them a
remember this.
psychedelic and
Yeah.
some big percentage, like 2/3 solved their problem. It's kind
Yeah.
of cool.
Yeah.
So we are seeing in the entrepreneurial business world executives who are doing macro doses, large doses. And again, they're doing it all of the ways we just talked about. Legal ketamine, they're going on and doing ayahuasca retreats, they're doing ceremonial
Psilocybin
things,
retreats.
all
Yeah.
sorts of
Yeah.
things. So we're seeing that. And then we're seeing a rise in popularity of microdosing. So when we talk about microdosing, we're talking about 1/10 to 1/20th of a regular, of a macro dose. So enough. We used to talk about being sub-perceptual. You don't even feel it, but it's working at some level inside of you. Now we use the word kind of sub-intoxicating, that you can take it and you can still drive and you can work and you can deal with your kids, but it's but just a little bit is the right amount of a microdose. And people are doing it for creativity, for connection, for to remember the interconnectedness of everything, for depression, for anxiety, for all of those reasons. The research is split. There's some research that says this is a placebo. What are you talking about? And there's other research that says, yeah, the stuff works. I don't know. It's I think it's up to the individual at this point. The research is you're not gonna find the answer there. And then what's not said enough about microdosing is there's kind of two ways that people practice it. Some people practice the what's called the fatty men protocol, where you do it on day 1, it's in your system on day 2, you let it on day 3, you repeat on day 4, and every month you take a break. And then others say the Paul Stamets protocol, where he's like, it's way too complicated. Just take it 4 days in a row and take 3 days off and do that for a month.
Yeah.
What I hope people hear me say is take the break every month. And the reason that, and this is not often enough talked about, that there is some literature that says if you just microdose all the time and don't take a break, you can have a cardiovascular risk. So that 2-week break every month is about cardiovascular safety. And the example that is given, I guess it hits a similar receptor, was the, am I saying it right? Fin-Fan? That came from Fin-Fin. Hit a similar receptor, and over time it ended up leading to some cardiovascular events. So there's no, it hasn't happened yet. It's a theoretical possibility, and because of that possibility, that's just the advice. Take a break every couple of weeks when it comes to microdosing. I'm sorry, every month when it comes to microdosing.
Okay. Well, you've taught me something. I actually did not know that was one of the risks. I thought, honestly, it was just tolerance, just acclimating to that level and wanting it to continue to have the desired effect over time. So there's a real physiologic risk that has been hypothesized here.
And it is, that's the main reason I recommend it. But you are right as well. What's interesting about, and let's stick with psilocybin, what people like David Nichols has studied and said over and over, these are non-toxic, non-addictive, in some ways anti-addictive, and that our body quickly says, that's enough. I don't need, I'm not going to have the same reaction. But there's not a lab animal that's going to take psilocybin over food. So yes, we want to take a break every month to also reset our tolerance and to get back in there.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you see right now? Again, we're kind of talking about this future. What do you see as the biggest barriers to widespread acceptance and use of these medications?
I think acceptance is coming as, we're this in popular culture, books like Michael Pollan's, like The Immortality Key, like so many different books we're getting acceptance, and then having hundreds of universities studying this and publishing paper after paper after paper about, wow, this could help for this and could help for that. That all helps with our cultural acceptance. We have two main barriers. We have to now get the FDA to say, oh, well, thank you for calling psilocybin and MDMA a breakthrough therapy, but now we need it to be rescheduled and need to have access to it for the medical professionals. And then on the religious freedom side, we need our DEA to have an exemption process that allows our psychedelic churches, which have been operating since we founded the country, to have our psychedelic churches truly apply for an exemption and be able to practice above ground. And why is that important to practice legally versus protected? A church that practices legally can have medical professionals on site without the medical professionals worried about losing their licenses. A church that's practicing legally can get insurance. A church that's practicing legally can do more things in terms of promoting and in terms of having public discussions about their safety record and their ethics. So we need, as a country, to move the religious freedom above ground and to allow the medical professionals to work. And then that collaboration between the two can happen. It can happen out in the open, and that's good for everybody. So you can then choose, I want to be greeted by a person in a lab coat who's going to give me a diagnosis, and we're going to assess where I'm going along this journey. Great, go do that. I want to be greeted by some kind of spiritual person who's going to do it that way. Amazing. But we need everything to be legal and to come up, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen in the not too distant future.
I love that. Well, with that, that's probably a good mic drop line, because you're providing some hope for all of us that are strong believers in this work. And I hope you're right, man. I hope it's going to happen.
It's happening, Jeff. There's too much. We're all hungry. You're having these discussions. We're hungry for this. We're tired of numbing our symptoms. We're not looking for something to hide things. we're looking to bring it close so we can understand it. We can assess it, and we can then move on.
Yeah.
That's what these tools do. And
And
we're looking for things that aren't putting pharmaceuticals into our body every day and living with those side effects of just not feeling alive. And what does not
yeah,
feeling alive do to marriages and do to being a parent and doing into our work, into our creative lives?
yeah,
That
yeah.
costs, the human cost of that is just too much. And we're getting there. And we're getting there. It's happening. We had a church this summer get a federal exemption. First non-Christian ayahuasca church just got an
Oh,
exemption this summer.
yeah.
And MDMA, it was close. And then we saw the entire state of Colorado and Oregon. We're seeing what Minnesota, Massachusetts was close. Florida was close. It's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
happening, Jeff.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that, man. It's good to talk to someone who's in the know. As I said, I get just updates from our common friend, Dr. Mithofer, every now and then. I'm like, oh, it seems like we're so close. So, oh, man. Well, I've really enjoyed it. Tell us where, for those of our listeners who want to learn more, where can people find you out in the social media world?
Yeah, so I'm super active on LinkedIn and Instagram, and I do like it when people follow me, and then also when they drop me lines. I respond to my messages. The Veterans Guide to Psychedelics, Psychedelics for Everyone, and Beyond the Trip are all available on Amazon and everywhere books are sold. And then mattzemon.com. I do have a guide to microdosing that's free right on my site. I have a bunch of videos, and again, love it when people reach out to me.
Nice. And just to spell that out for our listeners, that's MATTZ as in Zed, EMON.com. So
That is it, Jeff.
yeah, please visit his website, follow him on Instagram. Let's keep this energy rolling, because I think it's going to be good for the greater good of our planet. And what a better time, right? We're all separated by these little light boxes that trick us into thinking we're not lonely, and we're lonelier than ever. So
Absolutely. It's perfect
yeah.
timing.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Matt, I've really enjoyed it, man. I've learned a lot, and I think this is going to be a popular podcast. I think we've got a lot of people curious about this topic, so hopefully this will cause some more digging around with our crew anyway, and some more interest in the field.
I love it. I appreciate you doing this. Appreciate the work you're doing with Wild Health, and hopefully we'll meet in one of these trips up to Asheville and get to
Yeah,
see each other in this
totally.
3D world.
100%. Yeah, my son is not in college at Chapel Hill like we thought he would be. So, but I love that town you're in, and maybe we can arrange a hookup at some point if you're up this way.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm up there pretty regularly.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in again, Wild Health listeners. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks so much for listening to the Wild Health Podcast. If you want more daily health education, be sure to follow us on Instagram, which is filled with health optimization how-tos, grocery shopping lists, guided breathwork posts, myth debunking, and so much more. You can find us at Wild Health MD on Instagram.